As a political analyst, how would you forecast the upcoming months, the run-up to the provincial council elections?
Very important. Very important, very serious, and not because of the UNP and the SLFP either. It's serious. We are having elections in the north after 25 years. 25 years. I was part of it the last time around, much younger then. We have eliminated radical evil from the soil of Sri Lanka in the form of defeating the tigers. But the tigers are not, they were the worst, but there are other evil, dark forces in Sri Lankan society and in politics. These people are not happy that the elections are going to be held. It will be turbulent. There will be challenges, maybe even dangerous challenges, to actually have this election, because for some of these people, the idea, their worst nightmare, there was this movie with Eddie Murphy called 48 Hours. And Eddie Murphy, in a barroom scene, he says, "I'm your worst nightmare." He's got this gun. He says, "I'm your worst nightmare." There's a group of white people. I'm a nigger with a gun. So, for some of these racists in our society, their worst nightmare is about to happen. In Mr. Vigneshwaran, you have their worst nightmare, Tamil who talks back, and talks back in English and Sinhalese, not only in Tamil. So it's a change in the psyche. The majority of people are for it. I saw an opinion poll run by a television station, not yours, which showed over 50% in support of the 13th Amendment without modifications. That's a new poll that's running. So I think the majority of people just want to see this through. But there are those who will do everything possible to prevent it, to try to take some of the powers away so that the TNA may be provoked into boycotting, to having an election that's less than free and fair. I mean, they may do things and put the blame on Mr. Douglas Devananda, you can always blame another Tamil, and destabilize the council when it's held. So the coming months from now to November, we have three crucial nodal points. The visit of UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, Madam Navi Pillai, in August. The provincial council elections in late September, and the assumption of the chairpersonship of the Commonwealth by President Rajapaksa in November. So these are very, very important, crucial months where we have to watch and pray.
Well, Doctor, we've always spoken about the local political arena in Sri Lanka, and obviously we will be continuing to monitor the situation, and of course we'll be having one-on-one discussions about the developments that will be taking place ahead of all these important events. Let's now go to the global arena. But when I say global arena, I'm not going to go to the Middle East or to the Americas. I'm going to go closer to home, to India. And this has relevance with Sri Lanka.
Okay.
And this is to do with the Kachativu Islands. We see a huge feud surrounding the Kachativu Islands. And is this feud or this dispute, can we compare it to the Senkaku Islands in Japan, where there is a dispute for the territory between Japan and China? Here we see Kachativu Islands between Sri Lanka and India. How would you view this feud?
Well, the difference there are two differences between our case and that of Japan and China. One is that the relative strengths of the two parties more or less equal in the Japanese-Chinese case. China, of course, is a big power, but Japan relies on the United States. It's an economic power. China is also an economic power. There's one difference. The second difference is that that issue was never really resolved. There's another party, not on those islands, but there's another problem between Russia and Japan on islands. So there were never agreements, there were never resolutions. But the Kachativu issue had been resolved between India and Sri Lanka. So it is bad news that it's coming up again. Now it's been pushed for some time by Tamil Nadu politicians. There's been an issue around fishing, but there was always a Tamil Nadu factor in the Kachativu issue. Elections are coming up in India. I keep saying never forget that. In the spring and early 2014. But what is important is that when we hear people in our part of the island saying, let's tear up the 13th Amendment, let's tear up the Indo-Lanka Accord, they don't understand that if we try to tear something up, the Indians can also there are things that they can tear up. I mean, if you want to get into the tearing up game, into the game of unilateral modification, two can do that. So, we say this, somebody else may be tempted to at least pretend to or try to dabble with, okay, let's modify this. We want to take things away from...
Because there's always a link between every action.
Absolutely. And there's a well-known doctrine, I mean, Dr. Kissinger introduced this, the concept of linkage. If party A behaves badly on issue B, then you don't challenge them on that issue maybe, but you challenge party A on another issue, you link their behavior to some other thing that they are interested in.
So you're saying if Sri Lanka talks about tearing up the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, the Indo-Lanka Accord, India can say, okay, we want the Kachativu Islands back.
It could, because somebody has surfaced the argument that this is within India's legitimate area, her sea boundaries. I mean, it's within the area of the ocean that is conceded by international law as belonging to India. Now, what we have to remember is that there were two major issues between India and Sri Lanka before July 83 and all of that. And there I need to go back to something. The Indian intervention in Sri Lanka in 87 was directly related to July 83. There is no record in the many books and reports that have come out about Indian involvement in Sri Lanka of training of the Tamil subversives before July 83. I mean, the Tigers paid retired Tamil Nadu service persons to train them, but the Indian intelligence guys got involved only after July 83. So we played into their hands on that one. But anyway, there were two issues before that. One was on the citizenship of the plantation workers of recent Indian origin, and the other was Kachativu. And both those issues were resolved in favor of Sri Lanka by Madam Sirimavu Bandaranaike.
And that was because of close ties with Madam Indira Gandhi in 1974.
And even before Indira Gandhi, the Sirima Shastri talks with previous Indian administrations. Now, that's one thing that Madam Bandaranaike managed to do. She was a Sri Lankan patriot, one may even say a singular nationalist. And she even asserted herself in international relations because during the Bangladesh war, she allowed Pakistani troop movements by air through Katunag airport. The Indians were not happy. But even after that, Kutimani, who was a suspect so-called terrorist, was arrested and handed back to Sri Lanka by Madam Indira Gandhi's government. Now, this is because Madam Bandaranaike maintained, through telephonic and other interactions, a cordial relationship of mutual trust at the highest level of leadership. We have lost that. It's not just under President Rajapaksa, but certainly from Jayawardena on, we have not restored that personal relationship between the leaders of Sri Lanka and India, which enabled the issue of Kachativu to be resolved in favor of the weaker and smaller country, Sri Lanka.
But it may be argued, Doctor, that okay, there was an agreement between Indira Gandhi and Sirimavu Bandaranaike regarding the Kachativu Islands, and it was solved, as you say. However, now it may seem as if the Kachativu Island is being used as a carrot and stick approach, where India is saying, if you do this, we are going to tear up the agreement for Kachativu Island. So they are using it
Well,
as a stick?
India hasn't said anything so far. It's Tamil Nadu that is pushing. India has not pushed back. I mean, Delhi has not pushed back. And it's remaining silent. I think that by remaining silent, they are permitting Tamil Nadu to say these things unchallenged. Nobody can stop Tamil Nadu saying it, but then there could always be a clarification from Delhi, which is in our favor, in favor of the status quo. So far, I have not noticed that. So, just as in Colombo, I mean, as a democracy, we permit demonstration and people to go and paste things on the wall of the Indian High Commission. So, they can't keep Tamil Nadu down. Tamil Nadu will keep shouting about Kachatevu. Unless we provide Delhi with an incentive rather than disincentives to maintain the status quo, even though Tamil Nadu is taking this stance. Now that's a tough one because elections are coming. So if we are going to outweigh that, then we really have to be quite smart and give them something with which they can balance off Tamil Nadu. It doesn't help when we say that, the Indo-Lanka Accord, I actually saw a state-run newspaper, English language newspaper, an editorial which said, "What accord?" That was the editorial. Now, what if somebody in Delhi says, "What agreement on Kachatevu?" That's a game that two can play, and when the other guy is much bigger than you, you've got to think a couple of times.
Well, and finally, Doctor, we see surrounding the Kachatevu Islands, we see Jayatilleka Jairam, the Tamil Nadu Chief Minister, and the DMK leader, Karunanidhi, in a tug of war. There's rhetoric flying around in Tamil Nadu, and the latest reports say that Karunanidhi has filed a case in the Supreme Court, asking the Supreme Court to ask the government of India to get back these islands. So there is a bit of a tussle between these two in Tamil Nadu itself. How do you think this really affects the geopolitical connection between Sri Lanka and India?
Very seriously, because Tamil Nadu wasn't always this hostile. Even at the end of the war, in the last stages, Jayatilleka helped us. She was cracking down on the tigers. So what has happened between then and now is something that we have to look at. How did we allow this how did we allow Tamil Nadu to become so hostile? And now it's a competition between Jayatilleka and Karunanidhi, and this goes back to the old competition between M.G. Ramachandran and Karunanidhi. And all of this feeds into the perceptions in Delhi because elections are coming up, and both the Congress and the BJP will have their eye on the Tamil vote. And Kachatevu is one of the many things that they can use as a stick to beat us with. So we have to think through the consequences of something we start. This is why I said in an earlier program that my dad used to say, never start anything you can't finish. So those who say, let's abolish the Indo-Lanka Accord, let's unilaterally change it, and so on, have to know that we are vulnerable, and we are vulnerable concerning part of our real estate, that's Kachatevu. We negotiated that under Mrs. Bandanayake, and we managed to secure that. And if we are going to keep it, we can't keep it through military force, and I'm not really sure that if we take it to the Hague or something, that it's going to work out in our favor. So we have to secure it through diplomacy and politics and the equation between our two leaderships.
Thank you, Dr. Dayan Jayatilleka, for joining us on another episode of Vantage Point.
Thank you, Maggie.
We'll see you again in a fortnight where we have more details on the political landscape and the political climate in Sri Lanka ahead of some key incidents that are to be taking place in the future. Take care and good night.